dun.
All right. Hello, everybody. Uh, Hope everybody's doing well. Hi, Ricardo. Um, so yeah, if you haven't already, could you please turn on your cameras so we can start? Also, I see. Yes, I see. You are marking your attendance. Let's see. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen. All right. So we will restart actually, or pick up from where we left on Monday. Um, so yeah, Monday we started talking about content analysis, and it's the first method of research we're going to discuss this semester. Monday's lecture was sort of heavy because the thing is when you try to teach method, like you go over many technical things, like their actual steps, as you could see in the slide, there are actual steps that are involved, and we use some technical language so we could precisely explain and describe what the researcher is expected to do. And though for that sense, it could be overwhelming. So today, I'm going to go over the steps again, but instead of just talking about it, I'm actually going to show you an example of a research article, how it's being done, so it would illustrate the point more clearly. Um, so the first two steps we've already covered. So you state what the message characteristic you're looking for. So are you looking for a specific topic or looking for a specific tone, a visual feature, you name it, right? And then we said you identify the units of analysis. So are we looking at like pictures, text, and if it's text, we're looking to like full paragraphs, sentences, words, combination of multiple things. What are the units you are conducting the content analysis on, right? Um, And this is only if you're doing the the deductive approach. The steps would be different a little bit, but up to this point, when you define message population, so remember I said if you're let's say analyzing one Instagram account or one newspaper, you would say, okay, we're looking into like a time frame, so last 6 months for the last 10 issues, or like the top 50 pictures from an Instagram account. From that, you can either do the whole thing or you select a representative sample. So you say, I will pick the 100 most liked or 200 most liked images from that Instagram account, right? So it could be that like you looking for specific thing, or like just random, because you could say, yeah, we had like 1,000 units to analyze, and so for the sake of uh, practicality and easiness, we randomly selected 300, something. Then, and here comes like the difficult part, is that you would propose categories by which you're going to analyze the units of analysis. So the categories could be, for instance, uh, something about, you say, so if it's, you would say like violent content in video games. You then have to explain what you mean by violence and define it precisely. So you say violent video games or any games that involve violent acts from the player towards other characters in the game. And by violent, like something that involves like guns, swords, and then you can explain, does it have to involve like blood or not, right? So yeah, that definition would then determine how you're going to code the content, like violent and non-violent. Then you develop the coding scheme, and so the coding scheme basically, and it's called codes for a reason. So I know in previous semesters people get confused what codes mean. So code, it's called coding because you would then assign each level to a number. So let's say we're coding violent video games, okay? So you would say 0 is like for completely non-violent. 1 is for slightly moderate, slightly violent, and 2 is for like extremely violent, right? So you could have like 3 levels, 4 levels, depending on how you want to slice it. And so it's called code because then you would have a number. So if you see extreme violence is 2, there's no violence, it's 0. So that's why it's called coding. So the coding scheme must have that. And it would precisely say what are the criteria. That is to say, extreme violence means. So you could say it involves killing other characters with graphic images. So like if you kill someone by a sword or by a gun, you actually see like their head exploding or something. So they will code that extreme violence, and so it'd be 2. If it's mild violence, so you could hit someone, but there's no like graphic representation of like death or like explosions or anything, you could call that moderate violence. So the coding scheme is that thing, the list that has all the criteria. That's the coding scheme. You test your categories on a sample of data to see if they fit, so if it makes sense to apply it to the unit of analysis. And finally, once you do that, so this would be the actual content analysis. You look into the frequencies by which those things emerge. So if we are analyzing one video game, we would see like how many extreme violence scenes you get in an episode versus non-violent versus moderately violent. So you summarize that quantifiably. So you see numbers like 60% was like this, 30% was like that, etc. Right? Hence, it's a quantitative approach. So you're converting qualitative data points into quantified code, and then to your readers. So here I'm going over like some key terms. So coding a state, like you turning open-ended qualitative data points to measurable variables. So yeah, by converting them into like numbered items that represent categories. Variable is the factor that you've selected. So in the example I just gave, the factor is violence. That's one example. You could look into something as simple as gender of the character. That would be one variable. Another variable would be the vividness of the images. A third variable would be the complexity of the language. Variables are linked to your research question, and we explained what variables are previously in multiple lectures. Categories are then the levels within that variable. So the one I said, like you have the violence, that's the variable, and then you have three levels: non-violence, moderate violence, extreme violence. So those are three categories or three levels within, right? And each one would be represented by a different code: 0, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, you name it, right? Themes, sometimes you would see this. Sometimes people would say categories. Sometimes they would say themes. So themes sometimes is like when you need to combine different categories into a larger category. So if you're analyzing, let's say, an Instagram account, you can collapse the content that let's say, an influencer or celebrity you're watching. It could be like brand promotion and self-promotion. Like those are two large themes. And within each themes, you can have brand promotion. Maybe you could have explicit promotion, implicit promotion, and then underneath self-promotion, you could have something, I don't know, about like concerts, performances, movies, etc. Right? So it would be like a super category, let's say this way. And units, as I said, is like the small components which you're analyzing, be it like pictures, text, social media posts. So are these terms clear so far? Because it's really important before I start my next part of the lecture that you understand what these terms mean, right? That you have questions before we proceed. No questions?
Right, wait, there's one. The question is to double check the message population includes both the time frame and the category. Because like
The message population is, so yes, the message population means the units you're going to analyze. So that's the time frame. The categories is the thing you're going to apply into that message population, right? So you decided I'm looking into the last 6 months of my Instagram post, for instance, right? Then you come up with categories and say, okay, let me see how can I fit those pictures into these categories and whether my categories are going to account for all of these units or not, right? But the units of and the population units won't tell you by themselves what the categories are. Right? So the categories have to come from you as the researcher. So at that point clear?
yes.
All right, so we have time. So I'm going to go over an actual research using content analysis. So again, you will be asked in another assignment soon if you want to take to analyze the content analysis article. So as we did before, so I'm going to analyze an article that uses content analysis so it would illustrate the point. And it's uploaded to, I think it's uploaded to Blackboard, at least when I checked. So the title is Strong is the New Skinny, a content analysis of Fispiration with authored by Pupil and et al. 2014. And so the study purpose was like examining the message or the narrative broadcasted or sent by the Fispiration website. The message about body appearance, diet, and exercise, right? So I'm not sure if you heard that phrase before, Fispiration or Fitspo or hashtag Fitspo. So it refers to the type of content that aim to promote like extreme fitness as an ideal body that people, especially females, should aspire to, right? So it probably the inspiration movement started like maybe like started to become popular like 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, like around that time. And so the authors want to see what type of, they have multiple research questions, but like what in general, what type of a message that those images and text by these websites send to the audience, right? So this is probably you've seen a similar content before. So this what Fitspo content looks like, and like strong is the new skinny is like the slogan that introduces the title. So it would be like in the different websites, the different social media channels. You've probably seen images like this before, right? Uh, so now you understand what they're looking at. So the questions they have, the research questions, they have 5 research questions. Um, so what body types do fit for websites feature and promote? So here, like looking at body types, uh, what were the beauty ideals promoted in those websites? That's the second question. Uh, do these websites emphasize thin ideal messages? So we have like thin ideal message being promoted. Do this website show women bodies in a sexualized manner? So that's the fourth question. And what and finally 5, what motivations or motives for fitness that were endorsed by the Fitspo messages or the Fitspo content, right? Um, so I think most of the question are like sort of self-explanatory. It's like the thin ideal, however, or like the fit ideal, uh, is like about the idea like you are transforming into something. Like thin ideals, like when I show you a model uh, that I held as the standard by which the audience should aspire to become, to be like, right? So that's called like thin ideal. You hear about like thin ideal body or thin ideal model. That's what they mean. Okay. Um, questions for you guys, girls. Uh, looking at these questions and try to be careful with your answer. Are these research questions exploratory or explanatory in nature? Are they exploratory or explanatory?
I think they're exploratory because they're not looking at the relationship. They're just kind of asking. It's like it requires just collecting data.
Yeah, yeah. There are no relationship. If you look carefully at the question, they're saying what. So they have what questions. They don't have why questions, right? So what body types do these websites feature? So you're exploring what's being promoted, right? Uh, Anna or anyone actually can answer. Could you give an example of like an explanatory question? If you want to make any of these like an explanatory question, what would you ask?
How are these websites showing women bodies in a sexualized manner?
How you said?
How do these websites show women bodies in a sexualized manner?
Yeah. What do you mean by how? Like is
That's the explanatory question.
yeah, but what do you mean by how? You mean like how exactly they're doing it, or like
Like what images do they use? What words do they use? What angles do they use in their advertising?
would that be explanatory though?
Wouldn't the
Why do you
question
think
be
it's gonna?
explanatory?
Why
Wouldn't
do you think it's
the
going to be?
because it's trying to explain the causes and the roots of the reality. So maybe
Oh,
instead
that's
of
a
how I
different
can ask
question.
why, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, now you get it. Yeah. So if you ask why, like what, like yeah, why, yeah. So what? drives these websites to feature sexualized, objectifying images, then yes, that will be an explanatory. Explaining
Okay.
maybe the forces that puts it there. So you could talk about, I don't know, like a commercial purpose. You could talk about like uh, gathering ads for like, so if you're talking about like other causes or effects, then it's explanatory.
Okay.
Okay, causes and effects. If you remember
Yeah.
that, like two things, like how, why are they related? Yeah, but just
Okay.
showing here's how it's being done, then it's exploratory. Um, so here is like actually let me do this first. So here's how they did it. How they did the so this is about the population of the units for like so the selection of data is basically they looked into Fitspiration on 4 search engine websites or 3. So they did actually Google, Yahoo, and Bing, and they Google Fitspo or Fitspiration, so both. And then they included websites only in the first search engine results pages. So SERP is an actual term. If you see the like SERP, that means search engine research page. And so they only included the first 3 because they said, yeah, that's what the research show. People never go past, or like very rarely go past the third page. Uh, and then they excluded overlapped and deactivated websites. So overlap, sometimes you get repetitive websites. So like 2 web pages from the same website. So they excluded those. So they ended up with 51 websites. And then within that, here's the sampling part. Remember you said like you sample from the population. So they sampled only the first 10 images that appear on each website. So they ended up obviously 10 out of 51, like 10 times 51. They ended up with 510 images, right? So this is a sample, right? If they did the full images of each website, that would be a census. So you get the population sample for analysis. That's what they mean when you do something like this, right? Um, they never explained why only 10. I would leave the criticism later, but I'm just showing you what they did. Okay. I personally have a reservation about like why 10 only, but that's for another day. And then they said they're going to analyze the text, picture, and picture with accompanying text. So it's like the image and then the blurb, like at the bottom. Sometimes you have a description or something, and sometimes the like image with like graphs, so like a slogan printed on the image itself. So that's what they're looking for. So if that means if those websites had articles, so they're not looking at articles, they're not looking at like maybe like audio content or video content. They're telling you here what we are going to analyze. The units for our analysis is going to be text, picture, and picture with accompanying text. Okay, so that's the only thing they are looking at. The only things they're looking at, right? Now here, these are the categories. Okay, or the variables. These are the variables to be more specific. The categories would come in the next slide. So they said again, like they had 5 different research questions, if you recall, and these are the variables in these research questions. So they're looking for at the units, at the images and text, the body type, if it's underweight, overweight, muscular. Okay, underweight, overweight, muscular. The beauty ideals, and that's going to be determined by the skin, teeth, face, figure, and breast. Okay, so the beauty ideal or representation of beauty ideal. Sexually objectifying content, and it's defined either by exposing skin or like how much skin is being exposed in a picture or sexualized messages. Then the thin ideal messages, so any messages about body transformation, okay? And 5 motives for fitness. That is to say, what are the things that this content is emphasizing so people get motivated to become fit or lose weight. So the motives were like appearance, food, and dieting. Those are the motives. So here, so the question is, how are you going to define these categories, all right? So right here, this is a variable and it has, 3 categories at 3 levels. How are you going to define underweight, right? Or how are you going to define exposing skin? What are you going to do? So at least, okay, let's look at the first one. How are you going to define underweight, overweight, muscular? Any ideas? How are you going to do that? Or would you do that?
Maybe like by BMI.
Okay, by BMI, good. How are you going to do BMI visually? So you'll be looking at pictures, remember? So pictures and text, or pictures with text. So any idea?
So are you asking how we're going to evaluate if someone is underweight, overweight, or muscular? Is that what you're asking, Professor?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking. If you're conducting this analysis, how are you going to define or decide on who's underweight, who's overweight, and who's muscular? You're looking at images.
I mean,
how are you going to decide?
I mean,
Yeah.
you take a survey and ask like people, like, because obviously, like, it's going to be biased in regards to what you're going to portray as those categories. Like, everyone's going to have their own opinion. So I guess you would have to, like, you could take a survey and get the majority vote as to what they think is underweight, overweight, or muscular. Because, like I said, everyone has a biased opinion.
So you're saying we have a panel and we see what's the consensus on what looks underweight, overweight, or muscular.
Correct. Yeah. Because I mean, you can't really, if you were sitting here looking at something on a screen, everyone's going to have their own bias as to what falls under those categories.
Yeah. So what Ray is saying, like, those are subjective by nature. And so we have to have some sort of like a panel or like a group of people, and we see exactly what they reach collectively. So we take care of individual biases. At least we have a greater number that agree with some standards. Okay. So yeah, that's one way to do it. That's actually a valid way to do it, as a matter of fact. Then, okay, this is one example. So then let's see how they did it. So what they did is actually, the one way to do it is to do it with exactly what they say. You have a panel of people and they decide, they would set parameters. But another way is to look if that has been done before. So they use a female photographic figure rating scale. So that's an actual scale that's been studied and published. And they would use those standards to apply to their research. And so those standards had like 3 categories, so 3 levels: objectively thin, objectively curvy, and muscular. And so they define muscular women with visible muscle tone. And then they had ranges, like visual ranges of what would constitute thin or curvy. So here the authors relied on a previously established coding scheme. Hence, it is a deductive approach. Remember when we said inductive, deductive? So in deductive approach, you use something that has been done. There is a framework, and you use that framework to apply to your own case study, in this case. So if you would go then to this this article, you found that they did what Ray was talking about. So the original article did that. So they had a larger panel or larger number of judges, and then they set the parameters and specified the criteria of how a body would look overweight, and like what's the range in which you would consider it overweight or underweight. Okay, so that's how they did this part. And then the beauty ideal, they put different options for like criteria, what would make it fall under the beauty ideal message. So if it has some of or all of any of this, so clear and blemish-free skin, neat and shiny hair, symmetrical facial features, straight white teeth, lanky figure, and supple breasts, right? So here they are actually talking about specific body parts. And so if it had any of these, they would consider it sending a message about beauty ideal. So if you don't have straight teeth, yeah, then you wouldn't be considered portraying the beauty ideal, right? So the beauty ideal, as explained or as defined traditionally by the media or by the mainstream, okay? That's called promoting a beauty ideal. And then sexualized content, they define it specifically. So again, this could be subjective, right? But then you have to define like an objective criterion. So here they said a sexualized image is like any image showing women in bathing suits or underwear, right? So if the model or the fitness model is wearing like a bikini or something, that would be considered a sexualized image, regardless of what you as a reader or as a consumer think, right? So here, like, they're just saying this is the criterion we use, and we're just going to apply it uniformly, regardless of what each individual would think. All right. So you see the difference. This is like an objective approach, not like a subjective approach. Hence, it's deductive. You use something that is predefined and you apply it. Okay. Then ideal messaging is then what content would constitute like sending a message about like thin ideal aspiration. Okay, so they had also 4 criteria for that. So it said if the images show the before and after thing, these pictures, like, so you show yourself like back in 2018 and you look like, I don't know, not in a good shape. And then you have a perfect body in 2020 and they show you that before and after. I'm sure you've seen some version of that before. So they're saying, yeah, okay, this is like a thin ideal messaging, right? Then they also say, or if you have the thin pose, and the thin pose is defined like poses like would make the women in this case look thin or thinner. They usually are. So, and they were different techniques already explained by photographers before. So if you're angling your body at 45 degrees, hands on the hips, that is a well-known like a trick to look thinner, tilting the head down, right? And then the image would be like up there. So you would the figure would look thinner, crossing one leg in front of one another. So they had very specific, you see like how detailed they got, very specific about the pose, right? Like tucking your tummy inside. Yeah, like those very specific things to define what a thin ideal is, what a thin pose is, sorry. So thin pose that sends the message about the thin ideal. And then they looked at fat stigmatizing or like body shaming, as we call it. So it's like message that negatively portrayed being overweight, like, yeah, so for example, here, this is an example from the article, suck it up now and then you won't have to suck it in later. So this is sort of like, yeah, trying to make people ashamed of their bodies, like if they would do this, right? So this is one message, one type of, this is one category, okay? And then there's thin praise, messages that positively portray thinness, like do it for skinny jeans. And here messages, they mean text. So messages are text and then you have images. So they, again, to remind you, they did both pictures and text, right? So here you see a very, very clearly defined categories. So anyone, you can do this and repeat this analysis, regardless if you agree or not, right? So regardless if you agree with like the terms themselves or the criteria, this is replicable. And so it would be considered quantitative research or empirical research as we discussed earlier. So it's independent of what the author thinks and feels. And then motives for fitness, finally, this is the last variable. And so they define the categories, like if it had exercise, appearance, so encourage viewers to exercise for appearance, right? So it's like showing toning or like talking about toning, okay? Or like food guilt inducing, so encouraging viewers to feel guilt over food. So you'd rather, like for example, so you'd rather have that bag of potato over an image of a woman's flat stomach, right? So you see like a woman with like an ideal body, like actually, do you want to have this or like a bag of potato chips? So that's like it's inducing guilt about eating food. And then dieting restriction, like encouraging dietary restriction, like a meal plan prohibiting soda and processed food. So yeah, like any messages like about that, like follow this diet to become strong. Any message like that, right? So here, this is not exactly a coding scheme, but the code. So, but this is the basis of the coding scheme. What you see in here, when you hear like coding scheme, so it's like a sheet, and it would be then even more detailed than this, right? So you would then go into details, give more examples for each category in here. But you see then the difference between when they say variable and then categories. So we have 5 variables, and within each variable, we have different levels, right? So here you have 3. Due to ideal, they all lumped it into one. And so if it fits that or not. So if it's objectively thin, you code it as 1. If it's objectively curvy, you code it as 2. And if it's muscular, you code that image as 3. So that's for one variable. And you go then next to the second variable, next to the third variable, next to the fourth variable, so on and so forth. So this part clear so far. Like this is the step in content analysis. So you see what they're doing in here, right? So defining things more precisely. And so then the training, so how the coding went. So there were like 2 independent coders that created all of the coded the all websites for 10 images. So and they were unfamiliar with Facebook content and blind to the study hypothesis. So in other words, they didn't have anything to prove themselves, and they were new to this type of content, right? And independent means they did it independently. So if like Mara and Grant were doing it, they won't actually meet with each other first. So they have to look at the 510 images independently, rate them according to this coding scheme, all right? And so that will be independent coding. Then they will do a comparison. So first, the coders were trained on a different data set. So you would look into similar images, like outside from that population of 510 to see if the coders are getting it. And once you find like, yeah, they're getting it, you let them then code for the other images. So examine all the content like 510. Then some disagreements might arise. So after the 2 coders finish, Then you have to have like a third judge in order to see where they agreed or where they disagreed. So for example, right here, they disagreed about is it muscular or objectively thin. You have to have a third voice that says, okay, it's actually muscular or it's actually thin, like overrule one or the other. And so you have to have more than one person agreeing that this content or this unit of the content belongs to that category. And that's what we would call inter-coder reliability. So when two coders agree, we call that inter-coder reliability, right? So it's not only it's not only me that thinks that image showing a thin model. Oh, so also Maura agrees, and maybe Jay agrees, and Jed agrees. So in research, like if at least two agrees, that is permissible in most research papers. If you have more, obviously that's better, right? But always, if you're doing content analysis, you cannot do it by yourself. If you're doing quantitative content analysis, at least. So you have to have two, and it's independent because they don't influence one another, right? So if you see if they independently look at it, would they arrive at the same results or not? And then we compare and judge that. Okay. So this point clear so far, like what they did in here. And then the results. So for the coding results, so there is a number that measures coding reliability. You don't have to know how it's calculated. For if you're interested, I can tell you independently when we get to the stats part. But basically, it's coding reliability is assessed by something called the Cohen's-Kappa test, which measure how two raters agree on something, agree on the same thing, corrected for chance. So aside from chance, to what extent do the two coders agree? And so in this article, the Cohen's-Kappa range from 64% to 100%. So 1 stands for 100. So they agreed on all of the cases. So if they agreed, for example, that all of the thin images, they all agree what looks thin, 100%. Then muscular, they might have agreed 89%, something like that, right? So in each category, to what extent they have agreed. So agreement for body type and sexual objectification was the highest. So among the two coders in this research. So these two variables with all their levels, body type and sexual objectification was the highest. For thin ideal, variables was relatively lower. So only like around 65% to 75% agreement, which is still good, but relatively. So in the majority of cases, they agreed, right? And to remind you, the thin ideal variables are these right here. If it has been like a thin pose, right? Thin praise. And actually, you can see why this might be reason for disagreement, like a thin pose. Here you see sexualized content. It's more like a clear-cut definition. So bathing suits, underwear. It's either there or not. So you might have you would end up with a high agreement. Something more ideal, something more vague, like thin pose. So although in the gift example, how you know exactly if the person is tucking her tummy or not. So that's a little bit subjective. So the number of agreement, the percentage of agreement will go down. With that. And finally, here's the results. So here's what they found. So these are like percentages of what they found in the sample. So the about 98, almost 98 of the images had like a thin body type. About 24% had like a muscular body type, and about 11% got a curvy or overweight body type. Culturally based beauty ideals were represented by like about 40, like 93 and a half of the images. So 93 and a half had that beauty ideal about like blemish-free skins, straight white teeth, and all of that. Sexual objectification variables. So 43% got like had like bathing suit image, like women in bathing suits. 61% in underwear, and so the total would be about 84 or like 85%, right? For sexual objectifying text, it was around 33%. Okay. For 10 idea variables, so the images of like the before after were like a 17%. For 10 pose, they were like around 46%, and for the weight or like fat stigmatization was like around 46 and a half. Right. For the exercise motive variables, remember the last one. So about 93 emphasized exercise appearance, right? So you exercise for the sake of appearance, they defined before. About 26 were about feeling guilty about eating food. So the images with text. So about 26 were about feeling guilty about food. And 20% were about like restraint. So your motive for looking fit is like restraint or like diet, right? So yeah, this is a quantitative content analysis, right? As you could see, right? So remember when I said the point is to convert or transform qualitative data into quantifiable data. This is how it looks like, right? You had 510 images, right? There are no numbers attached to them. But then you say, okay, here the category, here's the variables we're looking at. Here are the categories in which we're going to rank or rate those images. So we can run some numerical variables. So you could have here percentages. I can tell you more precisely to what extent do these websites feature thin body types or feature sexually objectifying images, etc., right? So this is like precise, measurable results. Okay, so yeah, so that's the okay. Then let me ask you a question though. So, so assuming you were one of the coders, though, does an image like this one send a thin ideal messaging according to the coding scheme the authors have used?
I think it does because she's sort of in a thin pose, like the hand on the hips, and then she's also kind of turned 45 degrees. So I think that was something that the coders put down in their rating. So
yeah. So okay, nice memory, Julian. So it's actually, where is it? Let me go back to that. So you're right. That's yeah. So that's the same pose, right? So that's an ideal messaging. So it actually had like the same pose and sort of like the before and after too. Right? So it had two things. So like visual changes and then trying to look thinner, which also might cause some disagreement because if you imagine you two coders, does she look different in the second image? That's like a question, right? Maybe, and that's remember like when they said about the angle, so she's not looking straight at the camera, it's just sort of like this, right? And that's also like a trick if you want to look thinner. So yeah, that's a simple. So it's qualified for that. Yeah, good catch. But you could see why this might get difficult unless you have something very specific, right? Because yeah, the authors mentioned exactly like this is a sign of like a thin pose. Okay. So are these messaging trying to induce guilt?
To sorry, induce guilt. You said.
Guilt.
Yeah, they both are.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, especially so these are real messages. These are real images for real websites, right? Like, so are you sure you want that? So this one would qualify for that variable. And here, this is more of the one, the example I gave about the appearance. Yeah, so you can feel sour tomorrow, you can feel sorry tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right,
attacking.
so yeah, so one here, this is about food guilt, and the other one about emphasizing appearance, right? So yes, then I would have a discussion. So we would have another discussion board thread, and I would like you to, yeah, I summarize this article for you. I like to hear your what you think about the process. So I'll ask these questions also in the discussion board as well. But if you look at the variables, to what extent they are objective or not, or can be objectively assessed? To what extent the authors made that objective? So that's my question. And if you don't think if you see some variables are still not very objective, yeah, you can tell us why you think that. So which variable you think were vague for you or you did not understand? And then why didn't the author include variables such as ethnicity or age in their analysis? So there could be some other variables to be included, but why the authors did not include them? And then can you think of other categories in each variable? So aside from the variables, would you have added other categories, right? So here, and so here they have then 3 body types, right? So they've had like 4, 5, right? And here, for example, it's send ideal messaging. Can you think of like a 5th one in here? So yeah, were these variables, in other words, or these categories exhaustive or not? Okay. But we'll leave that to the discussion board. Any questions?
When is this discussion board due, Professor?
So I'm gonna post it later today, but you're going to have up to like the end of next week to post. So yeah, you'll have time.
Okay. Is this going to count as, it's not going to count as an individual assignment, right? It's just going to be like another add-on to whatever our assignments are.
Yeah, it's for participation. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got
So this is by no means not going to be like a detailed. Yeah, it's like just your real quick reflection or impression of what you heard and what you read. Cool. Awesome. If you don't have any question, yeah, please take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. See you.
Thank you,
too.
Professor.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.